Hello and welcome to this Tuesday's morning market briefing. We've got a lot to talk about, but firstly, Xi and Biden do try to ease tensions as Taiwan looms over US-China talks. As well as that, David Cameron does return as UK Foreign Secretary as Suella Braverman is sacked. So big news on both fronts. As well as that, we've got lots to talk about on the charts also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around to see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. But yes, the first article to talk about is Xi and Biden. Now, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping are expected to hold frank talks about Taiwan. And this comes as the two presidents are expected to meet in San Francisco this Wednesday. And the ties between these two nations are in their worst state for decades, with recent attempts at reconciliation derailed following a Chinese spy balloon that was downed over the US. And I'm sure many of you can remember that as well. Now, this has been a looming kind of issue and a big issue going into the US presidential elections next year, of course, as this is a key topic of concern by many presidential candidates. We've been hearing lots from Vivek Ramaswamy around his kind of dislike for the Chinese strength, economic strength and military strength that, is now bidding against the US domination of the world. As well as that, Biden has recently made great efforts to, stunt any investment into China. And as just mentioned, the ties between these two nations have been weakening, have been on a weak thread, and are really struggling to get anywhere. As we did see not too long ago, maybe a month or two now, the cabinets of both the CCP and of the Biden administration were traveling to one another's nations. So many individuals from the Biden cabinet did go to China to kind of discuss matters of investment, but these talks came to no avail. And as we can remember, I believe it was from the G20 meeting within Mumbai, I believe it was. It could have been in Delhi, I'm not sure. But the meeting that did take place in India didn't actually see Xi turn up to that, which as a result kind of was a bit of a high tensions moment, as we did see that kind of lack of Western to Eastern cooperation with those two large nations. But it will be interesting to see how these two leaders will discuss matters at that San Francisco meeting. Now, this new meeting will be a new attempt at establishing relations between the two nations, with Washington welcoming the engagement, but has warned it will not produce any significant deals, which is kind of interesting to hear. Although they're having these sorts of meetings with the two nations, we're not actually expecting any big agreements to be met or found. And as a result, you can kind of question the actual use of these sorts of meetings rather than them just being a simple optics kind of show. This is kind of seemingly just a matter of showing that, they're still working towards good terms. But if there's no intent on establishing, a real agreement out of these meetings, questions could be asked around what even is the point of them. Now, tensions are remaining high over the issue of Taiwan, and this is as Taiwan does go into their election in January, so really not too far away. And the issue is, and the worry is, of course, China's involvement in those elections could be massively detrimental to Taiwan's democracy, which it does pride itself on. After all, it is really the breakaway state of China, which established itself now as the democratic haven in comparison to what is seen within China and the CCP. So it will be interesting to see whether we do see any Chinese interference within those elections. We do understand that China remains, its kind of policy and its rhetoric over Taiwan being sovereign to China, and therefore we're in a tough situation of will China even invade? as we did see with Russia trying to establish their dominance over Ukraine as well. And, the possibility was always there that Taiwan does the same. But we have heard time and time again that the US will support Taiwan, which is why we constantly have these kind of issues of, national security and foreign relations around this specific issue. Now, Rick Waters, who until August was the US State Department's top China official, said both leaders wanted to prevent a further slide in relations at the lowest possible cost. So obviously not wanting to make too many concessions to one another. So, we understand that Biden's currently holding, those investment bans within China, and, China is, holding much a policy of cracking down and remaining very authoritative in its stance to US businesses. Whilst they do want the investment, they're keen to make sure they're not spying or doing anything like that, which is a kind of policy in itself. Now, the White House also said the leaders would not issue a joint statement, which is really signifying that weak kind of relationship between the two leaders. There isn't no collective message which they can reiterate with one another. Therefore, no joint statement will be provided. Now, Biden and Xi are expected to discuss a range of issues for around 4 hours, so certainly a good amount of time. But with the amount of issues which are piling on with the Xi and Biden talks, the question is, how much can they really even get through, especially when you add in, the time taken for interpretations, and that sort of thing, translations and that sort of thing. With China hoping to use the discussions as a way to further delay US restrictions, as well as get Biden to express opposition to Taiwan's independence. And Biden, of course, is likely to reject that kind of proposition. We understand that the US, including Biden, has been strong to defend, the idea of Taiwan's sovereignty, supporting Taiwan in its more Western policies and ideology in comparison to the kind of geopolitical enemy which China is becoming more and more so for the US in relation to the South China Sea, of course. Now, Biden and Xi do not plan to dine together after the meeting, but Xi will attend a dinner with US business executives which are concerned over investing into China currently, because as we know, China is, dealing with some very significant economic headwinds. Coming out of COVID, they've struggled, and coming out of their kind of the issues with now US kind of sanctions and the geopolitical issues which are arising around China, it is tough to invest there with a sane mind. Therefore, that's what the meeting really is for. Now, Apple, the big company that the US does claim, has declined to comment on whether Tim Cook will be there to attend. And of course, China has great relation with Apple as a manufacturing hub, and therefore it'll be very interesting to see whether Tim Cook does attend that dinner. So definitely keep your eyes on this. It's very key to understanding how trade relations around the world will be shaped. Geopolitical issues also push, these commodities such as gold and oil. So keeping your eyes on these sorts of topics are essential. Next to talk about, though, is David Cameron, who does return as Foreign Secretary for the UK. Now, Rishi Sunak stunned Parliament by restoring David Cameron to the cabinet yesterday, and this comes following the growing divisions between Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman. As we do know, these two, key figures within the Conservative Party have been jousting at one another despite, being in the same cabinet. And finally, we now have seen Rishi Sunak, as expected, ouster from the party. After all, this was very well expected due to kind of almost the shaping of Braverman's pitch to even lead the Conservative Party, as we do now know that certain Conservative Party MPs have already handed in their letters of no confidence in relation to Rishi Sunak's leadership. Now, the moderate James Cleverly was brought in to replace Braverman in the Home Office. Now, James Cleverly was the Foreign Secretary, and this Wednesday, the Supreme Court will rule on whether Braverman's refugee plan is lawful or not, with Braverman expected to call for an exit from the ECHR if found unlawful. After all, the ECHR is that higher level, that kind of statute, that kind of constitutional order of human rights established by the European courts in relation to certain rules. And as the Supreme Court is the highest kind of judiciary court within the UK, the Supreme Court does make the rulings on whether a law or action by a government official is in line with that kind of ECHR statute, which is why if it's found unlawful, it's likely it won't be able to go ahead. And therefore we are likely to see the more right-wing leaders within the Conservative Party which want this refugee plan to go ahead. We're likely to see them call for that to be removed. Now this comes, this move by Sunak represents his last throw of the dice in building a strong team ahead of the next general election, where the Tories do trail by 20 percentage points, and we've really seen this add up following the issues of Partygate with Boris Johnson, then the further issues with Liz Truss leadership, after that kind of level of political instability following Boris Johnson's oust, and then with Rishi Sunak coming in, he seemingly hasn't provided the flair which many people are arguing for. And with Rishi Sunak now, and so in response to that, Rishi Sunak now is trying to present himself as more of a change candidate. With the Tories kind of leading the UK for many years now, over 12 years. But Sunak's still trying to kind of put a spin on this and try and say, look, although we've been running the country, I haven't been, and I'm here to kind of change it for the better. Now, the biggest surprise of the reshuffle, of course, though, is David Cameron, who was handed the job of a foreign secretary, seen as he was last seen in politics in 2016. So it's kind of ironic to be hearing Rishi Sunak's looking to be the change candidate, but then he's reintroducing the Prime Minister of the UK, the ex-Prime Minister of the UK, who was Prime Minister from 2010 to 2016, and he was also, the Conservative Party leader for a further, 11 years. So it's kind of a difficult situation which Sunak is jousting with and dealing with, and he's attempting to kind of present himself as this change candidate, whilst also, utilising the kind of centrist, well-experienced Conservative Party members for his use in, gaining a bit more political strength. Now, the centrist Cameron, is now facing new challenges such as Ukraine and, the Israel conflict as well. So it's going to be some very serious issues which David Cameron is likely to deal with. And it does kind of make more sense why Sunak would bring in, someone as experienced as David Cameron in these sort of times. We're dealing with arguably the greatest geopolitical issues since possibly even, the end of the Cold War. And so bringing in someone with so much kind of, political kind of experience, and someone with, as much respect as David Cameron does on the international stage, it's likely that Sunak's going to be able to have a more stable kind of foreign relationship with other nations, rather than him, all of a sudden bringing in another new foreign secretary, and with all the geopolitical issues at the moment, that really isn't something that he wants to be doing, as it just weighs on the UK's international image. So bringing in, a trusted Conservative Party leader such as David Cameron will be very useful to him. That said, Cameron has recently disagreed with Sunak on HS2 cancellations, especially on the Northern Strip, but is happy to unite the party in these times. Now, the worry for Sunak, though, is whether the more right wing members of the party will rebel within the Tory party, of course, as Braverman did represent, a more of a leader for those more right-wing individuals within the party. So it'd be interesting to see how this plays out. Keep your eyes on this to see how the UK political kind of sphere does develop. Next to talk about, though, is the charts with US indices pushing higher. Now, yesterday we did talk about how, the US 30 in particular here had broken just above this trend line, which was acting as a significant area of resistance for US 30. Sorry, that was really bad. For the US 30, but yes, the US 30 has now broken above, seemingly also retesting it. So it'll be interesting to see now whether the US 30 can continue to move higher. As last week we just saw stagnation on the US 30, with it failing to move higher after reaching this area of liquidity and resistance. So it'll be really interesting to see now whether the US 30 can make some significant moves to the upside. So definitely keep your eyes on this. As you know, the US 30 has lots of potential after breaking above this area of resistance and this trend line. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about, though, is the dollar, which does move lower. After all, going into this week, we did highlight this 50% Fibonacci area, where we knew there was a strong area of resistance. And it does seem that the dollar has reacted significantly from that area, taking a strong move to the downside in a very bearish, kind of move. And this is obviously with, the US inflation data expected to come out today. And this will have a great effect on the way the dollar moves going into this week, of course, but also especially today. So this is why, looking out for that US inflation data will be so important to understand, as it will be driving the dollar greatly. Obviously, the dollar had been ranging for some time and had, kind of broken below that range and retested that range. So the question is now whether, dollar will continue on a move to the downside. So definitely keep your eyes on this. Next to talk about, though, is Euro USD, which obviously has been sitting, just at the top of this kind of strong area of liquidity that we've had highlighted for some time. It's continued to tap that 38.2% Fibonacci level, whilst it's sitting in this more bullish channel. The question is now whether it will be able to make a significant move to the upside from this level. But we've been saying this for some time now. After all, price has been sitting around this level since the 7th of November, so a full week now. But the question is whether, the Euro USD will find that liquidity it needs to take a significant move to the upside. So just definitely keep your eyes on this kind of pair, as we are kind of also, encountering this short-term bearish downtrend as represented by this kind of trend line. So whether we can break out of that area using this strong area of liquidity will be the significant question to ask and answer. Next to talk about, though, is pound yen, where we have seen significant bullish momentum. Now, we had broken back once again into this bullish channel, which we saw before breaking below, and breaking once again back into this kind of channel is very significant for pound, as it's now nearing its prior highs, as we can see up here around 186.68. so we're sitting around the 186.231 area at the moment, of course. But following, breaking above this short-term kind of area of resistance and liquidity that we were encountering on pound yen, where we saw pound yen ranging around, the question is now whether pound yen can hook back on itself and, use this once area of resistance for a strong move to the upside and a continuation to the upside, where it will be then able to break above these prior highs. As if it does reach this Fibonacci extension level, it will have finally broken above those previously made highs. So this is why you should keep your eyes on pound yen. It looks like we're now coming to retest this area, so definitely a significant area to note. The question is though whether this is just a false breakout and we will once again return below and once again fall within this range. So this is why it's so important to keep note of, and definitely keep your eyes on this. Next to talk about though is USD JPY, which obviously we've been talking about for some time now due to the great amount of liquidity it found at this 78.6% Fibonacci area and the strong bullish momentum that we've seen from it on the days prior and now weeks prior. And going into this week, we kind of, questioned whether we were going to see a continuation of this bullish momentum as we were to encounter this prior high and therefore strong area of resistance. And now we are coming into contact with that and finding that resistance very key. So the question is whether we'll be able to break above this area and continue a move to the upside, or in fact we'll now move to the downside in a ranging motion. So keep your eyes on USD JPY. Next to talk about though is gold. After all, going into this week, we did highlight this 38.2% Fibonacci area and area of liquidity as a very significant area for gold, which price may move off. And we have seen exactly that on gold, with price reacting perfectly to it, punching into this area of liquidity, tapping that 38.2% Fibonacci area and taking a significant move to the upside. We haven't seen, a continuation of that movement just yet. But going into this week, going into today's trading day, the question really will be whether, the fundamental news, which is also coming out at the same time, especially in relation to the US inflation data and other inflation data coming out this week with the key G7 economies, what that data is will heavily shape the way gold moves, just based on the fact that it is used as like a kind of, hedge against the dollar often, but also against the pound and the euro. So seeing how those currencies are shaping up with their monetary policy is key to see where gold may go, as well as that looking at geopolitical conflicts. So in particular, the two articles that we spoke about today, or not two, but the article that we also spoke about yesterday, with the two conflicts in mind, those being Ukraine as well as Israel and Palestine. Israel and Palestine being more key at the moment just due to the fact that it is more volatile. So keeping your eyes on that to see how it will affect gold, as well as also keeping your eyes on relations between Xi and Biden, as we spoke about today, which will heavily influence gold's price. So lots of things to think about when looking at gold, but it is in a primed bullish position at the moment, so keep your eyes on this. Lastly, to talk about on the charts though is Brent crude oil, which after all, going into this week following last week's moves, we did see strong bullish movement. And seemingly in yesterday's session, we were able to see Brent crude oil move to this 38.2% Fibonacci area, which is also, sitting within this, prior area of strong support. So the question is, could this now act as a strong area of resistance in line with this 13.2% Fibonacci area, as this may just be, another retracement period. And therefore making this just a short-term move to the upside before seeing a strong, continuation to the downside, which could be expected. So keep your eyes on this, as we could now see, a continuation of a bearish movement to the downside. However, of course, we did hit that $80 a barrel mark. So quite possibly we've reached the bottom for Brent crude oil. So definitely keep your eyes on this. That's all to talk about on the charts though. Lastly to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, with employment change being the first bit of data coming out today for the UK. Now, the UK, we will be seeing, so as for the economic calendar of today, we will be seeing UK's unemployment data coming out firstly, as well as the Eurozone's GDP growth rate. As well as that, we will be getting the German economic sentiment figure. That will be key to understand and hear. As well as that, we will be receiving the Spanish consumer confidence rate, along with US inflation rate, and that will be the real key one to note. Of course, after all, the core inflation rate is the one that's tracked by the Fed. This is what influences their monetary policy. The Fed has kept rates where they are at 5.25% to 5.5% for the last two policy meetings. And this core inflation rate really does influence the monetary policy of the Fed. Therefore, although we are expecting that 4.1% rate, if the levels come in higher or lower, this will have a great impact. So keep your eyes on this. It will be pushing any dollar pairs, gold, and any US indices, of course. So keep your eyes on this, as well as that we will have numerous Fed official speeches. So there you go, more on US monetary policy. And finally, we do have the Japanese GDP growth rate figure. So keep your eyes on all this data. Long talk today. We've covered a lot on the articles, lots on the charts, and lots on the economic calendar. That's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great trading day. See you later. Bye.